Friends, welcome to this episode of Leadosophy and my interview with Chief Warrant Officer 4, Kevin Morgan. Great friend of mine, served with Kevin multiple times in the U.S. Coast Guard, known him for 2 decades. Yeah, he talks a lot about his time in the Coast Guard, what leadership means to him, what followership means to him. We talk about a whole host of subjects from search and rescue, law enforcement in the Coast Guard, to diversity and, his time at Coast Guard Station Golden Gate in San Francisco, very dynamic place. And just a lot of his other experiences, Coast Guard experiences. And Kevin's lived all over the country, served in the Coast Guard all over the country, West Coast, East Coast. So really fun interview. Hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
Are you ready to permanently fuse leadership and philosophy? Then a word of caution. You are about to enter the fully abstract yet wholly concrete realm of Leadosophy. Our ideas are not always so clear and distinct. To validate this proposition, we welcome the host of Leadosophy, Tim Wood.
All right, welcome everyone. We are here on Leadosophy. You're here with an open mind because that's the rule and not the exception. My guest today is one of my longest time friends, Chief Warrant Officer 4, Kevin Morgan, active duty U.S. Coast Guard. Kevin's been in the Coast Guard for 25 years, 2.5 decades, Kevin. It's a long time, man.
I know, right?
Kevin and I came in the Coast Guard. Just a little background about Kevin and I. We came in the Coast Guard pretty much at the same time. I came in a little bit before him. I came in late 1995. Kevin came in 1996. And I retired obviously way before Kevin. Kevin's obviously still in. So I've been out for a long time. Kevin's still churning along. For how much longer? I think we kind of have an idea, but that's for now.
Wouldn't say I'm churning. I'm more just drifting in the current at this point.
Drifting in the current, Kevin. But Kevin's had I'd call your career illustrious. You've done a lot of great things. You've held a lot of high positions, command positions in the Coast Guard. Done fairly little administrative positions. It's pretty much all been operational, right? You want to talk a little bit about kind of maybe the 30,000 foot view of your career and kind of what you've done and some of the cool things you've done?
Yeah, I think similar to you, Tim, right? Like, as a bosun mate, right? Like operational, actually, boots on the ground and doing the things you see in recruiting posters is what, I think drove me to the Coast Guard and drove me to the jobs that I chose. I'm kind of in an admin job now, right? And I don't think I lasted. I think the ironic, I guess the funny thing is the job that drove you to retirement, I'm basically doing now, just in a sector a little bit further north. You were in Long Island Sound, and I'm in northern New England, so Portland, Maine, and the job that drove you to retirement is driving me to retirement, right? Obviously, I got some other circumstances in there too, but multiple command jobs, right? Station Golden Gate, right? Station Morro Bay, D7 Tacklet, District 7, Station Gloucester, here. So multiple jobs, multiple, great places, great people, great experiences, right? And,
So a lot of people in the audience, they may not know what a tacklet is. Can you describe? Because that was kind of like you did search and rescue for almost your entire career. And that was kind of like a spinoff.
Maybe we'll get into this in leadership, right? Like in the challenges of the, military kind of life, right? In the Coast Guard, right? Where there's, you can kind of basically bounce around, right? So, similar, you ended up taking obviously a CO job when you made warrant, but when I made warrant, I got a call basically saying, you can go to, fast response cutter, pro in Lockport, Louisiana, or you can go to, district response enforcement in District 7. So obviously as someone that was primarily West Coast and did nothing but search and rescue, boom, I was kind of thrown into the fire in District 7 operations for, like you said, for the audience that doesn't know, that's basically South Florida, Caribbean, right? So it's all narcotics, drugs, right? That's what drives operations in the 7th Coast Guard District, which does include Georgia and South Carolina and the eastern side or the western side of Florida. But I always used to kind of joke when I was down there, right? Like anything north of West Palm Beach was District 6, right? Because nobody really cared what was going on up there as long as you weren't killing. Well, as long as you weren't killing somebody, nobody really cared what was happening outside of Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Caribbean. So
that's because that's probably one of the busiest places in the Coast Guard is down in South Florida and in the Caribbean, obviously.
It is the busiest, is the craziest, right? Has one of the spots. District 11 does too as well.
Which is California.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of the probably most impactful districts from the standpoint of, the Coast Guard's law enforcement capability and testing, the laws that we actually have on the books and their constitutionality. So lots of high risk, high op tempo stuff. And while I was there for a year, the person that was running the District 7 tactical law enforcement team in Opelika over at the air station, he ended up retiring, and I ended up sliding over to that job. So I kind of ran the Coast Guard's non-compliant vessel pursuit program, when I kind of went around essentially District 7 and really around the country and trained on ion scan technology, right? Using the ion scan machine, which is machine you'll see at the airports, right? When you'll get pulled out of the line randomly and they'll swipe your hands and it'll go through a machine looking for explosives or narcotics. So we trained essentially almost all the Coast Guard on those because we became the center of kind of excellence for the machines. And then, evaluated all the units around South Florida to make sure they were training and meeting all the requirements to, pursue other vessels and use warning shots, disabling fire, and understood the laws of, high seas and indication of nationality and all that. So it was, it was a good time. It was fun. And then I left there and went back to my roots to search and rescue, and came up to the Northeast and took over Station Gloucester in the summer of 2016. And then, did my 3-year stint there, and time came to rotate again. And this time I kind of chose stability for the family and the wife and everything. And I took a job up in Portland that I normally would never have taken.
Portland, Maine, right? Portland, Maine.
Yes. Normally never would have taken, wasn't excited to take it, still not excited to be there. But, at a certain point, you got to realize, what are you sacrificing? How many more T-shirts, how many more plaques on the wall do you need with your name on it when, you've got other things to consider, right? I think when you're younger and your kids are younger and they're not in school, right, it's all about the mission. And you do get to a certain point where that dichotomy changes a little bit or shifts, and you realize, at some day, right, you're going to have to retire, and you don't want to be, divorced, losing half your retirement to your spouse. So it worked out, right? And I was able to stay in the area, and keep my house, let my kids keep going to the same school, same friends, same everything. And I wouldn't, there's days that I wake up when I'm on the phone with somebody, talking about a lighthouse only blinking for 22 miles versus 24 miles and how that's the end of the world to them. Sometimes I have to get off the phone and like, what am I doing? Right.
It's all necessary though in the big picture, all necessary.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, and just like I did, you were in the search and rescue business for a long time, and that mission is one of, it's urgency. It's always urgent, when obviously the mission is an urgent one, but
yeah.
And then going from search and rescue, and then obviously down to South Florida where you're doing drug interdiction, stuff like that. And then you're going into the world of aids to navigation. It's like time slows down and extends, because we both did it. And it's not that those missions are not important. It's just nothing that we were used to doing our entire career. Right.
Yes. Right. And I think that sums it up probably great, right? Like you're used to fielding that phone call of, the fishing vessel that's overdue for 12 hours, right? With 4 people and what the weather forecast is, or, you're briefing the admiral on, a vessel on the high seas, right? With no indication of nationality with, or mixed, maybe, I don't know, Venezuelan flag with, Colombian, master or whatever it might be. Right. And, trying to institute international law, right, for right of visit boardings and whatnot, right? So you're doing real, or in my standpoint, right, like real nation impact stuff to, prevention, right? Which again, aids navigation is important, but I'm sure you didn't get.
We love our aids navigation.
Maybe I need to be on a couch here, talking about why I went to prevention.
No, it's it's obviously the aids to navigation mission of the Coast Guard is prevention for a reason, and it's all part of the big picture. But yes, it's definitely going from the world of search and rescue to aids to navigation is, and like I said, it's just it's difficult if you've done search and rescue your whole life and then going into the world of aids and navigation. Especially for me, it was hard for me because I'd never done that mission. So I had a huge learning curve, and from a leadership perspective, I was just like you are now. You were overseeing multiple units with that aids and navigation mission, and you had some experience in aids and navigation. I did not, so I just basically had to take a back seat, man, and depend on other people, their knowledge, their competence, their recommendations until I could kind of get my certain book level knowledge up to a certain speed. So it was hard for me.
I'll be honest, Tim. I mean, I did some ATON stuff, right? But that was,
long time ago,
20 years ago, and multiple 12 packs later, right? Like, yes. I don't remember a lot. Ironically, not that much has changed in a lot of it, but one of the other things I do here is I'm the ice program manager. I've never broke ice. I've never been on an icebreaker. So
can you explain that mission? Can you explain that mission for people?
Yeah. So domestic ice breaking, I don't have the numbers right here in front of me, but a huge percentage of the cargo and heating home oil comes through barge in northern New England. So because environmental reasons, because the topography up here, there are no pipelines, there are no New Hampshire's the granite state, and there's granite in Massachusetts and Maine. So just for the topography purposes, there isn't a huge vast network of pipes that go to everybody's houses like you would have in other parts of the country. So the old days of these houses that have the oil burning furnaces, right, and oil trucks that deliver home heating oil, right, is what 90% of the houses have in New England, and that oil needs to get to them some way, and the best way for it to get here is via barge. So with winter, things freeze up, and when it freezes up, barges need to be able to get to these facilities to offload their product, and they don't have the capability for a plethora of reasons, right? Environmental, right? Legal, just, you name it. They don't have, more than 3, 4, 5 days of surplus on hand. So, one of the missions is obviously we need to keep those facilities open. So we've got 4 ice breaking tugs that I manage, and we make sure when ice conditions develop, they're there to break them out.
So when you say manage the 4 ice breaking tugs, is that kind of just managing basically their logistics, right? Their schedules, because they have to rotate. They can't be going obviously day in and day out for weeks on end, right?
Yeah, I obviously manage their schedule. I help work them through any kind of personnel issues maybe they potentially might have, right? And
Right.
work with the district if they have a shortfall or their shortage or something to surplus somebody else and just keep them essentially operational. I try, obviously you try to limit and you try to take all of the crap that they're going to get and you hope to stop it all on my desk. That way they can just focus on the mission itself, right? And not all of the other like peripheral crap, right? So that's the thing that I really try to like press is you don't worry about this, I'll worry about that. You worry about ice breaking because I can't help you. I can't help you with that. So, you kind of tell me, and I, obviously like I lean on, I've got some great officer in charges, right? Young chiefs that are, magnificent. So, it makes it really, really easy to manage when you don't really have to manage much. They just kind of take care of everything themselves. And,
So you're definitely just in a kind of a support role, whatever they need, they can call you. Cause that's what I remember about the position you're in now. And like Kevin said, I retired from the same position that Kevin is in now. Just I was in a different location. I was in Connecticut, which is basically Long Island Sound and New York, Connecticut area. So yeah, so definitely I remember the ice breaking season being quite hectic. Obviously, the worse winter you have, the colder it is, the worse the ice breaking is. So
luckily, knock on wood, right? This winter's been pretty good. So
been pretty mild, northern New England.
Been really mild, really, really mild. So hopefully it'll stay that way.
So let's dive into leadership. You and I can remember in our early 20s when we were super immature. Is that an understatement?
I'm not quite sure I've changed much. Right?
Yeah, no, me neither, man. We're still kids at heart. We had a lot of fun. We did a lot of. Kevin and I, our first unit stationed together was in Northern California, Fort Bragg, California, which is about an hour and a half south of the Oregon-California border. We did heavy weather search and rescue on the West Coast. Is it safe to say that we were in positions of leadership as young bosun mates in charge of our duty sections or whatever? We were in positions of leadership before we really saw ourselves as leaders. Yeah. Is that safe to say?
Yes.
And I say that because, again, I didn't see myself as a leader at that point. It was just kind of like, it was almost like a firehouse club that we just did search and rescue. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Yeah,
right. Yeah, I never really thought of it in the sense like I'm the lead. I guess in a certain sense, right? You knew you were responsible for X, Y, or Z, but you really didn't. I never really like took it of like it's my job to lead these handful of people, even though it wasn't a huge number, right? Like what?
Yeah, like 10, maybe 8 or 10 or 12.
10, right? Like I never really thought about it in that like context, right? Like of how do I never really thought about it coming to work, right? Like, okay, how do I get people wanting to do X, Y, or Z, right? It was just, this needs to get done. I'm going to do this. You go do this, right? Kind of thing.
I don't remember. I mean, I'll be honest with you. In those early days of my Coast Guard career, first 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I don't remember ever really talking about leadership. I don't remember getting a leadership speech. I never remember reading a book about leadership. I mean, I don't know if you've got the same experience, but it just wasn't something I ever really thought about.
I don't really think it was ever really thought about until really we were at the chief level, right? And then at that point, right, I always kind of like to say, right, like at a certain extent, like we're already broke, right? Like we already were molded into what kind of leaders we were probably going to be, right? With zero kind of like training in it, right? And then
it's all hands on.
It's almost, at a certain point, right, when you try to teach leadership now, to me, like I'm a dog that's been able to jump up on the couch for 20 years, right? Like what do you mean? And you're going to teach me that like I can't get on the couch anymore? Like, no, like that's
That's a
not going to
great
happen.
analogy. That's a great analogy.
I'm jumping on the couch because I've been jumping on the couch every day for 20 years, right? So it's definitely one of those things that we as the organization, right, have not, and we know it, right? Like it's identified, and there's some programs and stuff now, right? The Airman Leadership School and some of those other things, right, that are good. But I also think there are hurdles in the organization that really prevent, you can read some of these leadership books and and you're obviously well more versed in this than I am, and like some of these philosophies, but the way the Coast Guard transfers folks, the way Coast Guard views like diversity and all of these things are really almost hurdles to like leadership in, I think, a normal like standpoint. Like I think if you're thinking like as sports, right, or you're thinking, maybe as a corporation, right, like where as the Coast Guard, right, and I think maybe the military as a whole, maybe there's some other people that are different services that can speak different, right, but the Coast Guard as a whole puts a whole bunch of like hurdles that really prevent you from being able to be super successful at a unit, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's, I think it's funny, you talk about the dog on the couch thing. And when I thought about that, if your leadership style is a certain way, if you're molded a certain way over the course of 5-10 years, what you're saying is it's hard to change that style, or is it hard to be open to new ways of leading others, or you just say it's kind of a fixed thing once you're on this journey?
Well, I think to a certain extent, right? Like leadership is I think part of your personality, right? And I think like to a certain extent, right? I think someone's either a leader or they're not, right? I think you can take someone that's not a leader and teach them, and maybe they can get up to a certain point, right? And you can take somebody that's a great leader and give them a whole bunch of stuff and they can like just be amazing, right? But I think for the most part, most people probably just hover right around the status quo or the mean, right? Like they're either kind of a could have been a good leader, but didn't necessarily get the right training or the right like environment to make them succeed. So they just kind of like filtered down. Or you have the people that really weren't anything, and then they've kind of maybe gotten some training and gotten there. Or you do probably have those folks that are just terrible, terrible bosses, and they just suck, right? No matter what, and they're just kind of down in the bottom in the basement. And unfortunately, probably some of those people think they're good leaders, right? And it's like, no, actually, like you suck. You're a terrible boss.
So let's unpack the good leader characteristic. Would you know a good leader if you saw that person? I mean, I guess what's, and again, I don't know if there's necessarily a right or wrong answer with this, but you've had some good leaders, obviously you've worked for in the past. What, if you had to start maybe extracting some of those qualities, characteristics from those people, what have you seen in those people that you've worked for in the past where you're like, what, that is a good leader. I would follow that person any day. Can you maybe unpack that a little bit?
I think, it changes probably a little bit, right?
Based on context, situation, job?
Yeah, I think situation, right? Like job, like what you're doing, right? I'll say from kind of a middle manager or first line, manager, right? That has managed 30, 40, 50 people, right? What I always found the best, right? Like I worked for, I don't know how many captains, right? I can't even count how many 06s I've worked for. And there's really only 2, maybe 3 that stand out to me as somebody that I knew would have my back when the bullets were flying, right? And, metaphorically, right? When that SAR case didn't turn out good, right? Or you had a boat crew that ran aground or whatever it was, right? And you have embedded in the organization these folks that just love investigating, right? And investigating and investigating and investigating. And I always just say, like, no one's house is clean, right? Nobody's house is clean. It's just a matter of time before you find that I've got mice in this cupboard, right? Like I didn't know I had mice in that cupboard, but of course you were here with 30 people digging through everything for 45 days. Of course you found, a mouse turd in there. It was the captains that I knew.
And you're talking like inspections that you have going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah. I'm more talking, right? Like when you have a mishap, right? Because if you're operating and you're doing things, bad things are going to happen. It's just the law of averages, right? What I always found comforting, right, as somebody and a boss, was knowing that if I'm out there operating or I'm out there doing something and somebody makes a mistake, I'm not going to crucify them. And I'm going to know that I'm not going to get crucified. And knowing that you've got support from above, it allows you to operate and effectively succeed in mission execution when you're not constantly worried about, the what if scenarios.
You can just focus on your job.
Focus on your job.
Right.
Now, I'll tell a quick sea story, right? And I think they're all retired now. Or I know
you don't have to use names. You can just use generalities.
So I was first OIC job, Station Morro Bay. We get a call from a concerned citizen and condo commandos, right, overlooking the ocean, seeing a kid struggling, right, to kind of stay afloat, like in the surf. And it was about 4 miles north of Morro Bay. Conditions were, wind was blowing 20 miles an hour. It was a good, 4 to 6 foot sea chop. Station launched in our 25-foot response boat small, got on scene, right, and found a person face down, unconscious. Immediately got him up on the boat, right, wasn't breathing but had a pulse. Right now, anybody's been doing this a long time. That's pretty rare, right? That you get somebody that's in that, which means they just stop breathing. Like getting them advanced life support is kind of paramount, right? So, EMS was right there at the beach, right? Couple 100 yards away, right? To transit all the way back into the harbor would have been 15 minutes. And then, trying to do CPR on somebody, right? Or, or even like rescue breathe for them in 4 to 6 foot seas on a 25-foot boat going 30 knots as you're trying to get back into port. Not ideal, not happening, probably isn't going to work, right? So I contacted the coxswain and I was like, hey man, can you safely beach the boat, right? And he was like, yeah, I can do it. And I'm like, when I say safely, right, like you're not going to hurt yourself, right? And he was like,
and
yeah. He's like,
just to clarify, the coxswain is the person with the authority, responsibility for driving the Coast Guard boat.
Yeah. And I kind of said, hey, if you can do it safely, beach it. And he's like, and I remember him telling me, he's like, I don't know, we're probably not going to be able to get the boat back. And I just made the decision of, hey, who cares if we destroy the boat, right? Like, let's save a life. I'm like, beach it. Right. So of course we beach it, right. Get the guy off. Unfortunately he ended up passing away at the hospital. Right. But I know deep down, we gave this person the best chance at survival. Right. And so I got underway with the 47 and just in case we needed to try to pull the 25 off before it really got set up into the surf and everything. And they were actually able to back it off themselves. Right. And of course they spun some hubs, did about $1,000 worth of damage to the boat. And I got a call from the deputy that evening. Right. And here I am kind of high-fiving the crew. Right. Like couldn't have been happier. Right. Like risk-based decisions made at the appropriate level. Right. Like the appropriate risk for the appropriate gain. Like everything was perfect. Right. And this boss, this captain, right, his first words to me, well, don't worry about doing the investigation right now. We'll take care of that tomorrow. And I remember kind of hanging up from the phone going,
Not like, hey, good job or nothing like that.
Not good job, nothing. Just investigation. Like that was what he was worried about, right? Was the investigation. But that the rest of the time that I was at that unit, I knew here was a scenario where we did everything right. Nobody got hurt, minimal amount of damage. But I knew any instance that things weren't perfect, I was going to be done. Or I was going to have to fall on my sword to protect one of my people, right? And not that I wouldn't have done that, but, it's not something ideally that you want to do,
Sure.
So I always valued a boss that when bullets were flying would be standing in the foxhole kind of with you, right? And shielding you from, the folks that are driving their desks, essentially.
Yeah. I think you and I both have had one or two people in our careers that we've worked for that definitely fit that mentality, fit that mold.
Yeah. And, the last sector, the second to last sector commander I had, best boss I've ever had in my Coast Guard career, right? She wasn't operational at all, right? She was mainly, on the environmental side, but I knew she had my back, right? And that to me was priceless. So I always value that probably the most in any kind of leader, is one that, is okay with mistakes, as long as the mistakes are made with the ultimate goal, right? Of
Right. Good
intentions, and fighting the mob essentially is what it is, right? You've got in the Coast Guard, right? You've got a whole army of folks that do nothing but love mishaps, right? And peel them all apart, right? And find out anything and everything that went wrong. And not saying that, there aren't a lot of things that people did wrong and we need to correct, right? But it does in the Coast Guard, someone that's got your back is probably the most important,
Do you take that mindset that you have, especially of people that you have admired, like the sector commander you work for?
Yeah.
Do you take that and you try to be that person for people who work for you?
Yes. Yeah. And again, it makes you think that okay, I can go out here and I can operate freely and I can focus on mission execution. And one of the things that I probably diverge a lot, right? Especially when I sit on these officer in charge review boards and all these panels, right? And one of the every officer in charge review board, what's the first question that everybody asks, right? Why do you want to be an officer in charge? Why do you want to be a commanding officer? Blah, blah, blah. And everyone's always answer, right? And I hate it, is always, oh, I want to mold, our future generation, or some kind of, right? Where they're kind of, blowing smoke up your, and to me, the answer should be, I want to be in a spot where I can impact the public the most, right? Mission execution. I want to train people so they save people. I want to, bust drugs. I want to stop illegal immigration. I want to do the best thing that I can in whichever statutory mission, right, your unit falls under, right? That's what your number one goal should be on why you want to be an officer in charge, right? Is to do the mission, and not have to ask when I can take the boat out, or when I can do this, or when I can patrol here, or when I can patrol there, right? That's what's fun. All the other stuff sucks, right? All the other stuff sucks. Because at the end of the day, you don't get to pick your people, right? I think Bill Parcells said it the best, right? It's one of my favorite lines, and it really captures leadership in the military as a whole, right? You're asked to make dinner, but you never get to go shop for the groceries, right? You're constantly just given things and said, make spaghetti. And it's okay, well, I don't have tomatoes, so how the am I going to make spaghetti sauce? I don't have noodles. Okay, I guess give me eggplant. Okay, I guess I can try to make some, eggplant pasta. right? And I think, right, like it's.
So you're saying from a leadership perspective in the military, it definitely can be more challenging because it's not like you have a role in the hiring process. It's not like a nonprofit where I get to screen the applicants, right?
It's 100%. Like it's not even close, right? Like we're not even talking apples and oranges, right? Like we're talking arugula and candy, right? Like it's not even close, right? Like in the challenges that you face as a military leader to accomplish your mission isn't even remote in any other facet, right? Not even close.
Yeah.
But, you know, in the Coast Guard, right, like you get, you know, diversity in male, female, diversity in religion, you get diversity in race, you get diversity in geographical area that they grew up in, right? And then they're all kind of thrown together at different times on different cycles, and you're told to basically make them all get along and accomplish a job, right? Like,
yeah, and I do think from my time from the search and rescue standpoint, I think one of the coolest things about what we did in search and rescue, when you get a search and rescue case, it doesn't matter what color you are. When people are on that boat crew going out for a mission, like you didn't think about like what color people were, what religion they were, what was their socioeconomic background. Like none of that mattered.
no.
Right? It was just a group of parts coming together to achieve a goal. Yeah.
That when I think back at like the teams and the people that I think got along the best, right? And you see this, I think, in fire departments probably more than anything, right? Is they have a real like camaraderie amongst each other, right? That you know, when they get along and they're having fun, like good things happen, right? And I think, you know, to my time in Gloucester, right? Like the folks that were there that were from the Northeast, they were the best boat crews when they were together and combined with one another.
Is it because
we might have to edit this out? What's up? Come here.
You have my iPad.
I do have your iPad.
I am grateful for Kevin's time. He's got 2 little ones at home, so.
Can I keep borrowing it?
No.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I need it.
When would you get off the phone?
Yeah, like maybe another 30, 40 minutes. Do you want my phone?
Depends.
Depends.
Do you want to say hi?
Hi. Look who's on the phone.
Is that
Uncle
Cambria?
Tim?
Is that Cambria?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Cambria.
Come here, get in the camera.
Hi.
What are you doing?
Trying to get this app on Daddy's phone.
What app?
You don't have it.
Okay, what were we talking about?
So, can you motivate someone who is unmotivated
Absolutely.
by force? Right? I'm trying to anticipate your answer. You're funny.
No, right? Like I think you have to find the why, right? Find the why, make the why big enough, and then you can motivate them, right? I mean, you know, I take the classic example, right? Like you say, you have one duty section, you say like, hey, I want you to go out and do 10 boardings, right? Or you could say like this, like, hey, go out and do some boardings this weekend, right?
Law enforcement boardings, right?
Right,
Yeah.
law enforcement boardings, right? You might have a boat crew that will go out and get 10. You might have a boat crew that will go out and get 1, right?
Yeah.
Or you can say, hey, you're not going to get liberty until you get 10 boardings, right? Well, guess what, right? Like you're going to get 10 boardings. Why did you get 10 boardings, right? Not because they were motivated to get 10 boardings because they wanted to get 10 boardings, right? They just wanted liberty. So you made that why big enough, right?
Right. It's the carrot, right? Dangling the carrot.
Yep. And,
so you're saying that works. You're saying that works.
It absolutely works, right? Like
Yeah.
I'll take it, into my own context and what I'm going through right now personally, right? Like I hate vegetables. I absolutely hate vegetables, right? Never ate vegetables, didn't like to eat vegetables, right? Like lions, you don't see lions eating asparagus, right? But, with cancer, right? Like I need to eat vegetables, right? So now I'm eating 3, 4, 5 servings a day of vegetables, 10 if you count fruit, right? A day. Why am I doing that? Because the why got big enough, right? Like, so you can motivate anybody to do it. You just have to find the
right why and make sure it's big enough. Yeah. That's a good point. It's a good point.
Now the question is, how do you find the why, right? There are some people that just don't care, right? They just don't care.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that motivates them. I do think for a majority of people, right? 90, 95, 99%, right? You can motivate them to do anything. You just have to find the why and make the why big enough.
Right. Do you think that followership is, do you think you have to be a good follower to be a good leader? I don't even know really what a good follower is. It's came up. I mean, Jess and I were talking about this last week about like there's not enough emphasis placed on followership. We place all this emphasis on leadership all the time.
I think maybe I know what Jess was talking about, right? Like at a certain point, right? Like you don't need a bunch of team captains, right? At a certain point, you do need people that don't want to be the boss, don't want to be the one kind of leading everything, right? And it's a good place to, like we joke about it a lot, right? Like being a BM2, right? Just being an E5, having a little bit of responsibility, maybe a couple people that you're responsible for, right? And nothing else, right? Like there is some simplicity and some, I guess, sexiness, right? To just like, okay, I'm going to come to work and I'm a framer and all I do is I hammer nails from here to there, right? Like,
you know your job, you come in every day, you do your job and you go home.
Yep. Right. And you think back of a lot of folks that I've had work for me, they were some of the best people that I had, right? They were some of, and they stayed at the E5 level and a couple of them got higher tenured out, right? But they were the mechanics that you wanted on your boat crew, right? They were the guys that would do the PMS. They were the guys that never called in sick, right? They were the guys that never, had personnel problems, right? They couldn't take a test. They didn't care to advance, right? So as an organization, we kind of shunned them because they didn't fit like in this box that they were supposed to, right? They were they were a hinge to progress, right? They were you didn't advance fast enough, so all these other people can advance, so we're gonna kick you out without the thought of, hey man, right? Like this guy's fully qualified, knows his job, knows it great, right? Like, and we're paying him bottom dollar, right? Like he in the civilian world, right? He would be the perfect employee. Like, wait a second, I've got this employee that doesn't want to be a supervisor, doesn't have aspirations, isn't trying to like undercut somebody or make a name for themselves or do X, Y, or Z. All they do is show up to work every day on time and do their job and do whatever I ask them to do.
They hit all the bullets. They hit all the bullets in their job description.
Yep. Right. Yep. Perfect. Right. That's the perfect employee. That's the perfect employee, I think, if you were running any kind of business, right?
Right. Yeah.
Someone that's reliable and someone knows their job.
I'm a firm believer. I mean, it doesn't matter what organization you're in, military, civilian world, it's comprised mainly of paycheckers, people that come in, do their job, collect a paycheck and go home. They don't want extra responsibility. They're not looking for all that kind of stuff. And every organization needs people like that. Every organization. Yes. Yeah, I agree. Can you teach leadership? You believe that?
Yeah.
Or is it something you just kind of, because I go back and forth between, I always think that you'll be more respected if you're in a leadership role, your technical competence will gain you respect as a leader. You believe that? How technically competent you are?
Yes. Right. Like it makes it a hell of a lot easier. Right.
Right.
Like, you know, I'm trying to think of, you know, it was much easier for Michael Jordan to be a leader because he was the best player on the court every night. Right.
Yeah.
So just in the sense of course, people are going to want to follow somebody that's the best in the room. Right.
Because of what they know, because of what they know.
Because what they know and what they do. Right. Like I don't think it's just sports. Right. I'm sure that there's some, you know, folks at Bristol Myers Squibb, right, that like are great leaders because they're the smartest person in the room and everybody wants to listen to them because they know what they're talking about, right, and are great, right, and people want to impress them, right. So yeah, I think technical, you know, it definitely makes it easier, you know, even from our job, right, like it was much easier for me to get in the room and talk about boat driving and what you needed to do and how you needed to do it when they saw me get behind the wheel and just, you know, make the 47 foot motor lifeboat dance. Right. And it was like, oh, okay. You know, maybe Mr. Morgan knows what the hell he's talking about. Cause did you just see that? Like, you know, I'd never seen anybody do that, you know, like, but I will say, like, example, like sea story, like I hadn't probably towed a big fishing boat in probably since Fort Bragg, right? Like big fishing boat. In fact, I don't even know if I had ever really towed one quite this big. And we had a case in Gloucester, and it was like a 95 foot, like 150 like ton like fishing boat, right? And I had a breaking coxswain, of course, right? And he got scared, and I'm like, okay, like I'll take over. And I put the thing in side tow, and the wind was blowing, and I like put it in, and it like, honestly, like I was pretty shocked that like it went as good as it did, you know, and like, you know, I got it to the pier, like didn't touch anything. Like, I mean, it was like textbook, like perfect. Right. And, I like tied it up, and like everyone, like the whole crew was like, oh my, like just in awestruck. And like, of course I had to play it off like, yeah, of course. Right.
Like you could have done that every day, all day long.
I could have done that any day, but like, if you would have been there, you would have been like, yeah, you like,
yeah,
you know,
I'd have been nervous.
And I was, right. Like I was, and I played it off, and it worked like perfect. But right. Like from that point on, everybody, even like, you know, some of the BM1s, because, you know, as a surfman, right, like everybody's like, oh, I got a surfman, like blah, 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 right? Like, but they don't really get to see. And then, you know, when you are actually able to like, you know, show that like, yeah, like I'm good. Yeah. Right. Like it makes people want to listen and follow a little bit more. And we're no different, right? Like when you see somebody that's good and successful or something, you want to emulate, you want to impress, right? And you're going to follow, right? So
I think you're gravitated towards those people because of their knowledge and skill level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's just
right.
Natural. If it's a field that inspires you, that you want to be in, or
yes,
right.
Yeah. Definite technical expertise in knowing what you're talking about, right? Like makes you a good leader. Absolutely. Yeah. And also being humble, right? When you don't know what you're talking about, right? Like, and being willing to say, hey, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about here. Like, you tell me. Right? Like, what do we need to do? Right. And I think that gives people ownership. Right. And they see somebody that, you know, isn't afraid to say when they don't know something. Right. Because I think that's a bad leadership attribute. Right. Is somebody that pretends. Right. That's worse. That's probably worse than someone that doesn't know something is somebody that pretends to know something. And it's pretty easy to ID when somebody doesn't know like something.
I always say those people are going to get snuffed out, man. Those people are going to get figured out real quick.
Yep.
You know, because you're going to have mid-level managers that are super technically competent.
Yes.
And they're going to see that leader that, like I said, there's a difference between being humble. Just like when I was in the position you're in, I was very upfront with the people that worked for me. Like, hey, I don't know much about what we're doing. I'm looking to you to learn. I didn't try to like baffle them with a bunch of BS because I knew they would have sniffed me out.
Yeah.
Right? So I agree. Those people are
I tell them that all the time. I'm like, I don't know, you know, and I get stuff, right? Like, I don't know, you tell me. Can we build a tower? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's build a tower.
Well, and that's part of technical competence is knowing what your gaps are, what your weak areas are, knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. Right. And it just bleeds over into leadership. It's kind of like,
I'm not weak at much, Tim. So like, it's not like I've got to really, you know, it's not like I really got to think about it all that much.
Yes, you have very, very few weak areas. I agree. No, how would you describe, a couple more questions here. Like I said, I know you got family and you got little girls, and just a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap.
28 degrees outside in New England. I got no place to go.
Oh, that's true. It is cold up there. It's about 50 here on the west coast of Washington State. So, and the sun's shining. So what is Kevin Morgan's leadership style? If I had two polar spectrums, right? I had authoritarian on one side, democratic leader on the other. Can someone pin you into a box, your leadership style into somewhere on that spectrum? Or are you open? Do you kind of flow back and forth?
I think
situation, scenario.
I think it probably would depend on who you talk to and when along my career you talked to them. Right. Like, I think at a certain point, right? Like a lot of times people never really understand the why, right? In things, right? I will say probably without a fraction of a doubt, I think most people that if you ask them about me, they will know that like I had their back regardless, whether they thought I was a good boss or bad boss, right? It's probably mixed, right? Like 50-50, right? You know, you ask me, I'll tell you, I'm a great person to work for. Just ask me, I'll tell you. Right. But I think like you learn, right? Like as you go in different life experiences, I think to go back to like, can you teach a leader? Yeah, I think life and exposure and experience teaches a leader on things, right? Like you make a mistake on, you know, like this situation, you know, when it pops up the next time, right? Like, I've been here before, right? Like I know if I go down this door, right? Like it's not going to be good, right? So I don't think to a certain extent you could paint me into a box, because a lot of times I found as a leader, I was just dealing with the cards that I was dealt, right? With the ultimate goal of mission execution and meeting this requirement, right? But then given X to do it, right? Like you had to change your frame of reference almost daily, yearly, and like job wise on what was happening, right? Like, so I think to a certain extent, right? Like I got better at, I'm still not there yet. And I guess I'm going to retire before I really get there. But I think to a point where I was able to be pretty consistent down the line on things. But, you know, when you come into a unit and, you know, the boss that was there never showed up to work, right? And they were used to cutting corners and doing X and doing Y that was completely against policy. Well, you don't get the joy of being able to come in and be like, okay, you know, we're gonna not sweat the small stuff and just worry about the big stuff, right?
Right.
No, you can't come into that with that philosophy. You got to come in like, we got to get to baseline first, and then we can kind of change and do stuff. And I think a lot of times junior leaders or people in the Coast Guard don't realize, right? Like, you're coming in and you want to institute your plan, but it's not like you've got all the pieces to actually,
Right.
institute your philosophy. I mean, I'll throw like the sports analogy, right? Like if you're, if you're a football coach, right, and you go like, I want to run the ball and play good defense, but all your defensive linemen are 220 pounds and you don't have an offensive line or a running back, but you got a great quarterback and great wide receivers, are you going to come in and be like, oh, we're going to run the ball and stop the run? Well, like, no, you're not, because you don't have a running back and your lineman can't block the run, right? But a good leader goes into that situation and goes like, okay, this is what I want to do. This isn't where I want to be, right? But I know I don't have the pieces in place to do any of that. So let me see what I've got and what can I do to get the most out of what I have.
How do you turn your weaknesses into strengths too, right? How to leverage that.
And then eventually, right, through attrition and through, that's is kind of one good thing about like, if you got a crappy employee or a crappy boss, right, like sometimes all you got to do is just wait them out, like, 10 months, right? Like they're going to be gone.
And they transfer, right?
Comes in, right? And then eventually you can get things to where you want them to be. But then the sad thing is once you get things built up and you get them right the way you want them to be, you're transferring, right? Or somebody else is going, right? Like, and,
it's like as soon as you get to the point where you can like just kind of maybe sit back, kick your feet up, it's like, time to go, time to move.
Yeah. And I'll say, right, like my first year when I was in Gloucester, I got there and I think we only had 10% of the unit was certified at the jobs that they were supposed to do. So essentially, like, you're a BM2, like, only 10% were a coxswain, a boarding officer, and an OD, right? Like, or an engineer. Like, it's only 10%. And in that first year, we got every certified and everybody qualified in their jobs. We were at like 95% like certification rate for everything. I think I had like 17 boarding officers, right? Like 10 everybody was certified. Some of them, like, I signed their letters like, oh God, this is going to kill me, right? But I was able to sign those letters, and I was able to trust that they would go out. And, the end result of that was we did more boardings in Gloucester, right, than any other unit in the Coast Guard. We did almost 2,000 boardings, right? And I had, one fraction of the number. I think I had 40, 45 people, right? So, I mean, we did more boardings than some sectors did. In fact, we did more boardings than like the rest of District 1 did, just us, like by ourselves, right? So, and then, you go a year later, all those folks transferred, and we were back down to like square one, where we were able to not do really much of anything,
It's amazing what 12 months can do for a Coast Guard unit.
I think at the end of the day, right, like, to circle back to answer your question, right, like, I think if you were really going to ask people, right, like what kind of leader I was, you'd have to probably dive into each situation, right, and be like, well, why did you say that, right? Because there's always a why behind almost all of my decisions, right? Like, I don't think I ever made a decision like in a vacuum that was like, nope, I'm doing this because of this, right? I've never had like the founding principles of religion or something that like drove me to any kind of consistency, right? It was always, you try to take each situation as it's kind of coming at you, right? And
they're all unique. Each situation is unique.
Right? And maybe, I obviously made mistakes and, didn't probably do things as good as I should have, right? Like, maybe I should have done this, or maybe I shouldn't have done that, right? Like, I've had people that like I've separated.
Everybody can say that, though. Everybody can say that.
Right. I mean, I've had people that I've fired, right? And it's like, man, I probably really shouldn't have fired that person, right? And I've had people that like I chose to keep, and they turned out to be complete shitbags, right? So, you you know, you never really know.
Yeah. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Little reflection, huh? Little reflection, self-reflection.
I guess, right? Like,
So last question. 25 years, man. 25 years. What do you take away? How do you distill 25 years of military experience into a few parting comments? Because I know it was obviously obviously an entire part of your adult life, really.
I mean,
The whole part of it.
you know, the whole part of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, how do you put it in
A lot of great
context?
experiences and, crazy ones and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, like, at the end of the day, right, like, and you know this, right? Like nobody really remembers who the CO was or any of the attributes and the plaques and the medals that I've got, right? Like, they really don't mean anything. They're really just going to take up space in the trunk,
Just
right?
collect dust. Yep.
And I've never even been, the type of person that really wants like a shadow box, right? Like when I retire, that's like got all this kind of like stuff in it. I do like the idea of having all of those accomplishments and all those T-shirts and all that stuff kind of in a box, right, for the grandkids or my kids, right? Like someday being like, oh, like Dad actually did a lot of like really good, impactful stuff that we never really knew about, and it's just, like sitting in this box, right,
Right.
up in the attic. I don't know. I guess I kind of always envision, right, like the scene from The Patriot, right, where like Mel Gibson's got like the chest, right, and like his old axe and like all of that stuff in there. So that's kind of what I envision for my retirement. I don't know where do you have all your stuff?
But my shadow boxes.
Yeah.
She got me one of those little lockers, like the little foot locker things, and it's underneath a shelf somewhere, sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah.
And like you said, one day, obviously one day I'll give that to my two sons, and they can either throw it in the garbage or light it on fire. I don't know what they're going to do with it, but I talk about this all the time because we talk always. I mean, we talk so many times throughout the week, but my Coast Guard career, man, some days it seems like it was yesterday, and some days it seems like it was like a whole nother lifetime ago. It's when I have conversations like this with you, it's like all the memories flood back and the things we did together and led together, failed together, and made terrible decisions together, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, like, I don't know, man, right? Like you think back, right? Like, yeah, man, I don't know, right? Like I always just kind of go back to, my Golden Gate days, right? And, those were probably the best. That was the most fun I probably had in my Coast Guard career, right? Especially when when I first made chief, right? Like I was in probably the best situation, right? I was doing a job that I was really good at. I was in an AOR in an area that I knew like the back of my hand. And, you were
in the Bay Area a long time.
Yeah, I had
the decade best almost, probably a decade.
Yeah, right. Like so from 2002 to 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
Right. So 8 years, right? And most of that at Station Golden Gate, right? Like I was there a long time. And I had awesome BM1s, each in their own like quirky, weird like way. It was Jess, right? Like the upstart young like BM1, right? Who was smart, motivated, right? And like a go-getter, but didn't have a lot of experience, right? Because it was all at like the Cape, right? A lot of it was at the lifeboat school. I know she went TDY, a bunch of different places, right? But she was really, really kind of novice from like actual like station stuff, you know, and, you know, getting her to boarding officer school, like all the different schools. Like she was, you know, my little project, right, of like someone that you can mold and like.
She told me to ask you about the red folder.
You know, yeah, I do. I don't know if she still, actually, I had it.
She said she asked you about your red folder not long ago, and you said you still had it somewhere. So
I did have it. I don't know where.
She said if I ever lost this, Kevin would kill me.
Yeah, it was a folder with you know, God, right? Like everything when she was ops, right? Like everything that needed signatures, right? Like all of the stuff, right? Like it was in a red folder, and the red folder was more her, but like but it was good, you know, had everything in there. But, you know, I had great BM1s, man, right? Like Bobby, for all of like Bobby's like weirdness, Bobby was great at like certain things, you know.
And you're talking like the mid-level managers, kind of like running the nuts and bolts of how the unit was going operationally.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And like, you know, Kendall, right? Great at like admin stuff. Like he should have been a yeoman, you know. And like I think back at like how amazing that unit was, right? Even and you kind of left, right? Like a lot of these folk kind of came in as you kind of left. You and Scott had left, right? And you know, we had a good 3-year run there where like we had some of the best boat drivers, best people, right? Like imaginable.
Well, there was such a dynamic unit as far as mission set, and every day was different. There was never a dull moment as far as what kind of mission you were going to have.
No, you know, but I do think back too, right? Like to a certain extent, right? Like I was probably a terrible boss for anybody that had a family, right? And I didn't realize that really until I got to Miami, you know, and I remember like I worked all the time, right? Like, you know, the wife was working at the U.S. Attorney's office. I didn't have kids. I loved my job. I was working underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, right? Like, I mean, it was the gym, and we had a gym, we had like, it was perfect. It was the perfect job, right? You know, making great money, like in a great area, right? Like everything was perfect. But I sit back and I think to like about Brett Bonner and like Jason Gale and Bobby and like some of these folks that had kids and families. I was a boss that was always at work. I was always there, right? And it
wasn't because you didn't trust people. It's because you just enjoyed actually being at work.
I loved my job. I loved just hanging out, right? And Jess will probably tell you about like the 1600 like chief projects, right? And it was never that like I expected people to stick around at 1600 and do them with me, right? It was that I loved my job and I wanted to do it because I loved my job, right? Probably more than anything, right? And
there's a lot of leaders that can't say that,
you know. And I realized I probably should have. There were times when I should have just like left, right, and gone home and gone and I don't know, picked up underwater basket weaving or done something else. But like my hobby, you know, was my job. Like I loved it. I loved hanging out and with people and all of it. And it's one of the things that like at times, and maybe you felt like this, dude, like, I mean, you know, I'm a W4 now, but like, I still feel like I'm a BM2. Like I don't really feel like I've matured really all that much. Like I'm smarter and but like I still feel like I'm BM2 Morgan.
Yeah.
Sometimes, right? So like when I'm walking around and like I'm talking and I'm interacting, and I think that's what I'm going to miss probably the most, right? Is like I don't feel like I'm, you know, the 25-year crotchety like warrant, right? I don't feel that, right? But I do feel.
You were always, you were always, you know, I never worked for you. You never worked for me. We were always peers. You were always one of the most hands-on people I've ever seen as far as the technical job. You know, you were always that type of person. So I don't know as if you ever leave that. I mean, yes, you've obviously rose in the ranks and you're in more administrative roles now, but you're still always that hands-on person. You like to be in the middle of things. You like to know what's going on. You like to be a part of projects. That's just how you are.
I loved, man, more than anything, like even like going out into like the bosun hole, right? And like splicing double braided nylon with folks, right? Like I loved doing that kind of stuff. And it was never because I didn't trust them to do it. It was because I liked doing it. I loved doing that stuff. But I do realize, you know, kind of now, like I must have been an absolute terrible boss for folks that had a family, because I was always at work and I was always there and I was always doing stuff. I was always trying to like find other things to do and make things better. And, you know, I probably drove some of those guys, right? Like nuts, right? Like
if they didn't know why you were always there. Maybe you were.
Yeah, maybe they did, right? Yeah. Maybe they did, but I know, like I probably put pressure like on folks, right? Like, you know, Jess probably never felt it because she didn't have kids, right? She didn't have family. Like she loved
maybe
her job
some of the
too,
more
right?
junior people, maybe if they saw it, you know, the E4 level or E3 level,
right? Like, oh, the boss is always here. Oh, the boss is always here, right? And I remember at times, right, like folks coming in at like, I don't know, 1500, 1530, 1600, right? Kind of being like, hey, I'm checking out. And I remember looking up at my clock, and I remember not like looking up at my clock that like, oh, they're already leaving and going home. But it was more of a check like, oh, what time is it? Right? Because, oh my God, I can't believe it's already like 1600, right? Like, wow, you know? So from that standpoint, and I didn't really get that until I got to Miami, and I was essentially, after years of being the boss, right, and having kind of an open brow, like all of it, and I still probably had it as a W-2, but going into District 7 DRE, right, and kind of being like, all right, I'm checking out, right, it's 5, it's 6, it's 7 o'clock, right, or even when it was early, like, it's 3:30, nothing's going on, right, like taking off. And I remember my boss, commander, he's a captain now, great boss, would always look up at the clock. And I realized like when he would do that would make me feel, right, like oh, like am I leaving
too early?
Like, am I leaving too early? Is there stuff to do? But I know that's not what he was doing. He was doing because he was swamped with a whole bunch of stuff. He was seeing what time it was because, you know, he was going to have to go. If I was going, he's got to get on the road. And I realize now, right, like kind of in a heartbeat, like, oh my God, like that terrible leadership thing right there, even though I didn't know it's leadership, but that terrible habit was terrible. Yeah. And like, how did all the people that work for me, you know, like feel that, you know?
Well, thanks again for your time. I'm grateful as always.
All right, buddy.
All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that interview with Kevin. Always with Kevin, what you see is what you get. Kevin gives his ideas unfiltered. That's what I love about Kevin. Just a dynamic person, and have enjoyed knowing him for as long as I've known him. Been a great person to serve with and be a friend to. So remember, Leadosophy is about using the tools of philosophical thought to deepen your understanding of leadership, my understanding of leadership. I think we did that today. I learned some things from Kevin, some things I didn't know about what he thought on leadership, which was really exciting. So I thank Kevin for his time, and thanks everyone for watching. See you next time.
Thanks for watching and listening to another episode of Leadosophy. If you liked what you heard today, hit that subscribe button and check out Leadosophy.com and learn more about Tim's ideas on philosophy and leadership. We'll see you next time.